You're listening to the Patenting for Inventors podcast, part of the Look Legal Pods from the law firm of Nolan Hyman, the #1 source for your intellectual property, business, and entertainment law needs. Now here's your host, registered patent attorney, Adam Diament.
Hello and welcome to the Patenting for Inventors podcast. My name is Adam Diament, a registered patent attorney and partner at the law firm of Nolan Hyman in Los Angeles, California. This is episode 147, Tricky Time Zone Patent Deadlines. There are some tricky situations having to do with deadlines at the patent office, and they have to do with time zones, but let's go over the basics first. Oftentimes, when you get a rejection from the patent office, you'll see a notice that you have 3 months to respond if you don't want to pay extra fees, and 6 months if you are willing to pay some extra fees. Sounds easy enough. But what you think of as 6 months and the patent office thinks of 6 months aren't necessarily the same thing. Let's take the basic situation. You got a patent rejection. You have 6 months to respond before it goes abandoned. You get the rejection, and it's dated June 15th. When do you have to respond by? Can you respond on December 15th, or you have to respond by December 14th? Now make your mental guess in your head. Going once, going twice. It is December 15th. So you have that day that is the 6-month mark. So maybe that gives you one more day than you thought, and you have at least 6 months. Now here's another situation. If December 15th lands on a Saturday or a Sunday, you can file your response on the next Monday, and it still counts. Also, if that date lands on a federal holiday within the District of Columbia, you can file on the next date. So if the 6-month period ends on a Saturday and then there's a Monday holiday, you can file on Tuesday. So those are some relatively easy situations. Now here are some tricky situations. You live in Los Angeles. It's December 15th at 10 p.m. and December 15th is the last day to file your response to the rejection. Does that count as filing it on time? Make your mental guess. Going once, going twice. The answer is no, it doesn't count. You missed the deadline because it's already December 16th at 1 a.m. in Washington, D.C., so you missed the deadline. So if you're on the West Coast, you want to think of 9 p.m. of that day as the last time to electronically submit your response. Next situation. It's 10 p.m. on December 15th, the final day to file. You run to a 24-hour post office and get a date stamp of December 15th on your mailing. Does that count as filing it on time? Tricky, because in the previous situation, I said it's the East Coast that matters. So what is it if you go to the post office? Make your mental guess. Going once, going twice. The answer is every lawyer's favorite answer. It depends. The patent office will accept the date stamp of the place where you are mailing it from only if it is mailed by Priority Mail Express. If you do it that way, they accept the date that it was stamped. If you try to do it any other way, like first class mail or FedEx or something, the date is considered the date the patent office received it, not the day you sent it. Nowadays, everyone pretty much does everything electronically, but back in the day, I would hear crazy stories about driving to the post office at 11:30 at night to get the stamp. But even with electronic filing, I've heard stories about it being past 9 p.m. on the West Coast, so it's too late to file electronically. So they had to drive over to the 24-hour post office at LAX to get that date stamp, which I don't even know if it exists anymore. There was a situation I was involved with once a long time ago where there was a person on the East Coast, and it was 7 p.m. and he needed something filed that day to the patent office, but the law firm he was using was closed down for the day. So he was calling up West Coast law firms because it was only 4 p.m. on the West Coast and law offices were still open, and he needed this emergency filing done that day. So the firm helped him out. Okay, one last tricky situation. You have an international patent application, only U.S. inventors who all live on the West Coast, and there's a deadline of December 15th to file a response. At what time is the latest time you can file the response if you're going to electronically file your response? Now mentally come up with your answer. Going once, going twice. And the answer is either 9 p.m. on the West Coast or 3 p.m. or maybe 4 p.m. It was kind of a trick question there. The 9 p.m. West Coast time makes sense because of what I told you about before. It would be midnight on the East Coast time in D.C. But why 3 p.m. and maybe 4 p.m.? Sometimes in an international application, you can do things at the United States Patent and Trademark Office. So then all the U.S. rules apply for timing of responses. But there are some things that happen at the International Bureau for an international application, and that's all based in Switzerland. So you have to take Switzerland time into account, which is Central European time. And that's 9 hours ahead of the West Coast. So you have to do it by 3 p.m. West Coast time because that's midnight in Switzerland. So you have to electronically submit it by then. Now here's where it's super tricky. In the US and Switzerland, we both have daylight saving time. And when we're both on either daylight saving time or not on daylight saving time, it's 9 hours. But the dates the countries switch over and switch back to daylight saving times aren't the same. In the US, it's a little bit longer of a period. So if I'm doing my math correctly, there are a few weeks in March and a week at the end of October, beginning of November, where there's only an 8-hour time difference. So you can submit your response by 4 p.m. West Coast time. From my Googling, there's no actual time of the year where Switzerland is on daylight saving time. They call it Central European summertime, and the U.S. isn't on daylight saving time. So we don't get the reverse situation of a 10-hour difference. But who knows? Countries can change their daylight saving time calendar, and that could be a situation in the future. I would bet that none of you got that right, and that's okay. That's why I'm here, so you don't have to worry about things like that, and you let a patent attorney worry about that for you. And in going over all these scenarios, I hope you've learned one thing, and that's don't file things on the last day that they can be filed. My personal rule is that I pretend that the final date to file is the day before the actual final legal date of filing. So I don't have to worry about these crazy situations that can happen if you procrastinate and wait until the last day. You miss something by 1 minute, your application can go abandoned, and then it can cost you big bucks to revive your patent. That happens all the time. So just be safe and file things no later than a day before the last date to file, because messing up time zone situations, emergencies happen where there's a power outage or your internet goes out or you get into a car accident the last day of the response, or for whatever reason your credit card is declined. All those things can happen. So just make sure you file a full day before the actual deadline to be safe. Thanks for listening to the Patenting for Inventors podcast. And until next time, I'm Adam Diament, and keep on inventing.
Thanks for listening to the Patenting for Inventors podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please kindly rate and review on your favorite podcast platform. The contents of this podcast are intended for general informational purposes only. The facts of every legal matter are unique, and the content of this podcast should not be construed as offering legal advice for your specific legal situation. For more information about how we can help with your own legal needs, check out our services at nolanhyman.com. That's NOLANHEIMANN.com. Or call Adam Diament directly at 424-281-0162. The preceding information may be considered an attorney advertisement and does not establish any attorney-client relationship.
It's 9 hours.